Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 2 of Ask Mom About Real Estate. I'm Mac the son.
And I'm Becca, the mom.
Today, we are starting our first series of the podcast, and this is the home buying timeline. So we're just going to break down what the process looks like, really simply, of buying your first or your next home. And we're just going to be discussing things like appraisals, house hunting, and when to make an offer and when to start thinking about homes, all things of that sort. Okay, let's just jump right into it. When should someone start thinking about purchasing a home?
Well, lots of times people are always looking at houses, right? You know this from experience, right? You've been looking on Zillow quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm always scrolling on Zillow, Redfin, just looking through homes just for fun. And obviously, my wife and I, Peyton, we're always looking at homes just because we're so excited for the future, for when we can afford one and move.
It's super cool. And there's just lots of times you'll know when you're ready to actually pull the trigger is when you have something happen, like a life change, where sometimes you get married or sometimes you're going through a divorce. So you have like just different life experiences that happen. Sometimes you have a baby and so you need to buy a bigger place or get into a bigger place. And one of the things that I like to say, indicators of you're ready to buy your own home, is when you're ready to start paying yourself instead of somebody else. Because if you're renting, you're paying somebody else's mortgage or you're putting money in somebody else's pocket and not your own. And so I love saying that to someone, like, are you ready to start investing in your future and paying yourself and paying your mortgage?
I love that.
Yeah.
So with somebody who's been paying, $1,500 a month on their rent, and then they're considering, because their lease is coming up, whether to re-sign or purchase a home, why do you think it's worth it to go into buying a home when, let's say, their rent goes from, not their rent, but their rent was $1,500 a month, and now their mortgage is $2,200 a month. It's a $700 increase, and money may be tight for them, and so that can make it even more tight. Why do you think it's so much more worth it to purchase a home?
Well, obviously you want to walk through that process with them, and with their lender, and just to make sure that they can afford it. And if they feel like they can afford it with everything else, it's always going to be a good investment to invest in real estate, because real estate always increases over time. It may go down for a little bit and fluctuate here and there, but historically it always goes up. And so you're always going to make money in real estate if you're willing to play the game.
Yeah. So what kind of time frame would you suggest for somebody who's starting to think about purchasing a home? When should they seriously start looking, and what would that time frame look like?
Well, let's say that somebody is renting and their lease is coming up. I just did this with a buyer right now. Their lease was coming up the end of October, which we're at the beginning of October this week. And so by the end of October, they wanted to be inside a house. And so we got them pre-approved and all that stuff. Once we got them pre-approved, we started looking in August. So I would say 90 days before the end of your lease, just because that gives you a good window to find the right house for you, or to make an offer that may not go through and then you need to start looking again. So it just gives you some flexibility with timing. And don't forget that when you first buy your home, your mortgage actually doesn't start until the month after you purchase. And so you have kind of a free month there that you're not going to be paying a mortgage. So you wouldn't be paying mortgage and rent.
Gotcha. So then you can get settled.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
You have time. So these guys were closing the beginning of September, and their lender said they didn't have a payment due until November 1st. So they're still paying rent at their other place because they're still in that lease, but they weren't going to be paying rent and a mortgage.
So it gives you leeway. So that 3-month time span that you mentioned, they are able to, let's say they find a home within 2 months, it's still okay because they're not paying double.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I would make sure that wouldn't happen for them. I wouldn't have let them, unless they were okay with it and they had money in their savings or whatever.
Yeah.
These guys didn't. They didn't have any money to pay double. And so we had to really just kind of time that out properly.
That makes sense. That's awesome. So, you mentioned pre-approval. What does pre-approval entail within the time frame of buying a home?
So pre-approval is the most important thing prior to even going. I won't even show somebody a home unless they have cash in the bank to purchase completely with cash, or they're pre-approved with a lender.
I remember you mentioning, we were looking at houses just a few days ago, just for fun, and a couple walked into a new build, and the first question you asked them was, are they pre-approved?
Yeah, it's always my first question, and 9 times out of 10 they say no.
Yeah.
And so they like looking at homes and they want to see a house, but they also they really can't do anything unless they have cash in the bank. They can't really do anything until they meet with a lender. And getting pre-approved is a simple process. You just call a lender. Lots of times I'll give them a couple, 2 or 3 to call, and then they can even compare rates and stuff like that. Not interest rates, but like the rates that the lender charges.
Okay, yeah.
Then they can kind of shop around. We'll talk about that in another episode. But I'll give them a couple lenders to call, and that helps them to find the price point that they are comfortable with. And pre-approval is different than approval, but pre-approval gives me enough to be able to feel comfortable showing them homes.
And what is pre-approval based on?
Pre-approval is I call it a 3-legged stool. It's essentially your credit, and it's your debt to income ratio, like your debt against your income,
Right.
and then whatever your income is. And as long as 2 out of 3 of those legs are pretty solid, you're usually pretty good to get pre-approved for something.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And would you say that majority of the time people are surprised by how much they get pre-approved?
Yeah, yes. The short answer is yes. Obviously, really at the end of the day, what I counsel my buyers are, before they even go and get pre-approved, if we're having that conversation, make sure you know what payment you're comfortable with on paying a mortgage. It's probably going to be more than your rent. And have talked about that before you go to a lender, because a lender might approve you for like $600,000, we'll say, but you're really only comfortable with a $400,000 payment.
Right.
So just discuss that with me, with the lender, all that good stuff, and they can kind of walk you through, what you're pre-approved for and what you can afford.
Gotcha.
For the payment that you're looking for.
That's awesome. Is there anything else that you think is important to know for somebody who's looking to sell their home and purchase a new one, or a new home buyer, for pre-approval at all?
Well, obviously, your credit score is so important. Your credit score, the higher your credit score, you actually get a lower interest rate. And I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Oh, yeah.
If you have a higher score, like yours and Peyton's, you guys have really good credit scores.
Thank you.
If you have a really good credit score, you're going to be able to afford more of a home because your interest rate can be lower. The lower interest rate you have, the higher buying power it gives you.
Interesting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And even with that being said, would that be, so let's just go back to the first episode that we talked about equity in, right? And how at times a new build with a builder can offer you lower interest rates. Let's say you have a high credit score and then you get a lower interest rate because of that credit score. Does that mean you'd get an even lower one with that new builder? Wow.
Yeah, builders lots of times, I know the one that we were talking to the other day, they won't even look at you if you have anything less than a 640 interest rate. And so that's because of those
A 640 credit score.
boundaries. Yes. Yeah. Did I say interest rate?
Interest
Sorry.
rate, yeah.
Yeah, 640 credit score. And because of that, because fine lenders will not lend to you usually with less than a 640 credit score.
Gotcha.
They will, but your interest rate's so much higher. So the builder, they have to have something to work with to be able to give you that perk.
Okay, so once somebody gets pre-approved and they kind of understand how much they can afford, what their mortgage will kind of look like, and they're wanting to start finally looking at houses and
The
getting
fun
into that
part.
process. Yeah, the fun part really starts to begin, right? And obviously, I can only scroll on Zillow so much before I need somebody's help who's a professional, right? And so I start looking for a realtor. What does that process look like of finding a realtor as a buyer or as a seller? And what are some of the things that you should be looking for, just even outside of just experience alone, that will help you find somebody who's a good match for you?
I'm actually really glad that you mentioned experience, because I remember when I was starting out, even though I've been doing it over 13 years now, when I was starting out, I was so eager to just help and just go the extra mile for anyone. That even if I didn't know the answer to that question or I didn't know the area very well, I would do all the research and make sure that I just went the extra mile for that person. So I think just anyone that I'm a feeler. And so lots of times when you meet somebody, you're going to feel if they're the right person for you, the right fit.
Yeah.
But some of the things I would look at other than like looking up on Google or Instagram or, wherever anyone's looking for a realtor just online, that's where a lot of people find realtors.
Yeah.
They also find realtors looking at homes. And I'm not sure I would recommend that all the time, because if you're going and looking at homes and calling the realtor on the sign that you actually want to go look at, that realtor's first and foremost job is to the seller.
Gotcha.
Their due diligence is for the seller. They can represent you, at least in the state of Arizona and Idaho. They can represent you on both, but they have to represent you differently. And they first signed with the seller.
Gotcha.
And so you probably want to go find someone that can just represent you.
Where's the best place for somebody to go and find a realtor? Like you mentioned, social media, and also when they're looking at a home and they see the phone number on the listed sign. But where are some other good spots, or how would you suggest the best way to find a realtor?
Well, a lot of people find a realtor by asking around. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen on Facebook, hey, do you know a good realtor in Queen Creek, Arizona? Right. And then 500 people respond because they've all loved their realtor.
And that can be overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. But also you could pick and choose, like the friend that recommends. If you like them, then they probably would be a good fit for you. But so you could do that, or you can, like, referral is usually how I get people, is somebody has recommended me to them. So you can ask your friends, you can ask your family, you can look on the social media and stuff like that. But for the most part, I mean, that's pretty much it. But I would recommend you talking to a couple before you decide.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us in the first episode of our Home Buying Timeline series. We're super excited to continue this series, and we hope you join us in the next episode, and we'll see you then.